Webinar has started. Okay. All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. Just going to give it a couple more minutes and then just wait for everyone to come in and then we will get started. I've got this all here. And please do use the chat to say hi to everyone. Okay. Okay. Give it a couple more minutes and then we will get started. And I think, give it a couple more seconds, and I think that is it. So we'll get started. So hello everyone, and welcome to the AI Survival Guide webinar 2. Obviously, thank you for joining us for the second webinar for our free short course of AI Survival Guide presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Terry Magalakis, and I'll be your MC for this webinar as well as your course advisor at IT Masters. Your mentor, as always, is the Brenton Burchmore, largely recovered from his last week's flu and ready to rumble for today. So, welcome to you all. We hope that you're safe and sound, whether you're joining us from Addis Ababa or Adelaide. So, bit of housekeeping. Wanted to go through this. Before we begin, all webinars for this course will be held at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and obviously with the recordings made available for those of you who can't attend on this given occasion. Despite this, if you can make it, we'll hope you will attend the live webinars and contribute to the collaborative learning environment that is put in place. We quite clearly use Zoom for our webinars, and we encourage questions and the use of our chat throughout the session. So we ask that you direct all your questions relevant to the course content to the Q&A section and that you send all of your administrative type questions, that is either dates, times, resource availability, and the likes of that, to the support team via the chat. And also, please set your chat up to everyone as well. You can make that choice by using the drop-down box once you've opened the chat panel. And there are usually some, very experienced industry-based attendees who can be extremely helpful with any inquiries. So you may have, so especially in technical courses like this one. And like I said, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. However, if a question is particularly relevant to the discussion, I may interject during Brenton's presentation and put him in there as well. Obviously, about IT Masters, for those who have never taken part in short courses with us before, IT Masters is a training organization that exists as a partner to Charles Sturt University. So we work with CSU to create and deliver a number of postgraduate and master level courses. And we also market these courses on behalf. And obviously, we hope that the best way to do this is to give you some of the learning away for free. And it helps a lot that the people presenting these courses are the same as those who teach many of our subjects. And obviously, Britain, for example, has written about 14 of our postgrad subjects over time and currently teaches several. So IT means that these courses are a really good sampler for what to expect when you enroll into a postgrad course. So if we do a good enough job, then hopefully some of you will be encouraged to enroll into the full master's program if it suits you. Now, with that said, we generally want this course to be useful and rewarding. So we want you to learn some interesting stuff, have some fun, and hopefully make some connections with some of your fellow students. And as of to date, we're very nearly to about 2,000 people enrolled for this course, so you're spoiled for choice when it comes to meeting other students as well. And remember to troll around with the discussion forums and say hello there too. There are a lot of people participating in the course, so we like I said, who don't get to attend to these sessions live. So please say hi and do collaborate. And I'm going to mention that Lil. So Lil, as always, is around tonight. Is in the administrative and technical support role for IT Masters. So she looks after the chat and will answer any access related or administrative questions you may have. But also, she's also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, which is where you'll find the other materials needed for this course, including links and readings, discussion forums, and quizzes. So if you have any questions tonight or later on, please feel free to contact us using the details provided on that page. Obviously, for the upcoming AI subjects this week, I'll speak a little bit more about it, which you can enroll into now. So if you have any questions about those AI subjects, please hold them until the very end, and hopefully I'll answer them during that section. And obviously, please say good day and welcome, Brenton, and let us know where you're joining us from. So tonight we've prepared, a little poll to kick us off for today, Brenton. So while everyone is making themselves at home, we'll wait for a couple of minutes and feel free to give us an answer to the poll or a type in that chat as well. And as we're going through that poll, I'd just like to mention about our comp TIA bundles. So normally I just leave everyone to chat amongst themselves while we wait, but tonight I want to mention our new bundles. So with this one, these include the learning materials and labs, as well as exam vouchers, both with and without a retake option. They're surprisingly good value. Essentially, when you purchase one of these bundles, you're getting the exam voucher for free and very close to it. So we currently have bundles available for our three most popular certifications, and that is obviously the following: Security Plus, Sec AI, and Pentest Plus as well. So we can also build bundles for nearly any of the major CompTIA products, so just ask us if you want something a little bit extra. And on top of that, if you're still eligible for the discount tiers that IT Master offers of our students, just so you know that 15% off if you're a postgraduate student, that is if you have a student number, 10% off if you have previously passed one of our short courses, and 5% off if you're currently enrolled into a short courses. And you can find all these bundles on our store webpage. And obviously, to finish off the welcome intro, to obtain your discount code, simply fill in the form on the store page or email us at store@itmasters.edu.au, and we'll send that coupon code to you straight away, which you can apply at the checkout. And what I'm going to do now is put that link in for everyone in the chat box here. And that's obviously done from my end. So now it's time to welcome Brenton. So Brenton, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Terry. Good to be back. Good to be feeling good. I am mostly recovered from my flu. Thank you for everyone with their concerns. I may still have the occasional little cough tickle lingering, but otherwise I'm feeling quite chipper, I guess. Although that's not a word we hear very often anymore, and it's probably just telling my age now. Unlike my picture on the, maybe one day I should have a poll that asks people, how many years ago do you think that picture was taken? Although that might be an embarrassing answer. It's one of the things about pictures. Obviously, they're timeless and they can linger, but I probably should update it, shouldn't I?
No, Brenton,
Got
leave it.
a
It's a really good
little
photo.
bit more grey in the beard these days, maybe. But anyway, look, thanks for joining in and thanks for the intro, Terry, and all that useful information to let everybody know what's going on. I do want to apologize up front because I am still a little behind with all of the material. The missing lectures, pre-recorded audio from last week, they are now up there. So 1D, 1E are up there. We only have two of the four that you're expecting so far, 2A and 2B, but 2C and D should be up there probably by tomorrow. Now, if you're thinking, hang on, I'm listening to you now, Brenton, what's all this stuff about pre-recorded audio lectures? This is a thing that I do for all of the subjects that I write, the short courses and the full courses. I put a little bit of theoretical knowledge into a pre-recorded audio, and it's condensed, it's tight, it's neat, and it's meant to just give you some raw and powerful pieces of knowledge, theory, concept in a sharp, punchy manner without all the joviality that I tend to put into the webinar performance. So it's a little bit more content in some ways than you get out of the webinar. If you're listening to the webinar and you're wondering whether or not you should bother with them, yes. And if there's anyone in the chat here who has listened to some of those and wants to share with others whether or not they thought it was worthwhile, just put your comments and thoughts in the chat there. Let people know whether or not you think they're worth grabbing. They're only like 6, 7, 8 minutes each, but they are meant to add something. And if you're really on top of your game, and I'm also on top of my game, they'll be up there a little earlier and you'll be able to listen to them even before you get to the webinar. So, but I won't push you into that market. Now, let's share the poll. Can we do that, Lil, and share what people have said here about what they typically use AI for? And this is one of those wonderful pick what if you like polls. And the winner there is for quick answers, simple tricks and ideas. So of the little things. The smallest one here is keeping people organized, summarizing large body of text. Now, the interesting thing there is that's one of the things we're going to talk a little bit more about shortly as a real strength. And what we're going to do tonight is I want to talk to you about not just tips about how to use AI, that's kind of next week, but I want to talk to you a bit about how the fundamental design structure of what an AI is, what the LLM is, and how that lends itself to certain strengths and why, and certain weaknesses and why. That's really the message we want to try and get through tonight. And it's not exhaustive in terms of a list of benefits and limitations, but it's going to hopefully give you a bit of insight into the kinds of things that you can comfortably and reliably engage AI to do for you, and the areas where you might need to be a little bit more cautious or a little bit more prepared on how you go through it. So I'm going to close that. Can we stop sharing, and are we able to do that? Lil, can you do that for me? Make it disappear window. Or I'm just going to click the X button and get rid of it.
I'm trying to get rid of it for you, Brenton. I think it's
I've
out of control. Yeah.
I've gone. I've shared a little bit too much of my office here. That's a little better. Like, you got the messy bits on the edge. You're not meant to see that.
No, no.
Goodness me, I fixed that. I'm glad I saw that. Luckily, it's not too embarrassing. All right, that was the poll. We just had that, and there was lots of interesting things there about what people were using, and maybe some of you would have enjoyed seeing what each other are using the AI for. Let's talk about what we're going to cover this week in a little bit more detail. We've talked last week about the basic concepts. Here, it's what are some of the things it's intrinsically, inherently good at, and some of the things that it's not. That's what we're going to delve into today. Then next week, we're going to give you a bit more practical details. We're going to talk about things like workflow next week, not just how to write a good prompt, because you've all heard that before, but we're going to talk about the breakup and using some of the knowledge we've got from weeks 1 and 2. And then our fourth week is going to be our crystal ball gazing, where we're going to get kind of exploratory on where it might go. So today, we're going to talk about why certain attributes of what AI is and how it works is particularly good at managing bodies of text, and why that's a strong use case for it, how we can rely on it. We're going to then talk a bit about how that can be used for us in terms of a feedback loop, how we can use it to help us with some of the tasks and use cases we might have. Then we're going to talk about the challenge of originality. And I'm going to talk about this from, in the beginning, a little bit of science behind it, and say, well, this is why, in practical and functional terms, it struggles. I'm not just going to go with the simplistic answers. We'll delve under the hood a little bit, and we're going to talk a bit about the psychology behind why we have this false confidence problem, where we can be a little bit easily deceived that AI is confidently telling us something that it might actually be wrong. So this is the plan we're going to go through tonight, and in that order. So let's go back a step. And the first couple of points here are the same points we talked about last week. Right? So we talked about tokens and algorithms. We talked about how the generative AI and the large language model is really a thing that looks at individual words, individual symbols, groups of words, turns them into tokens, and literally turns them into a mathematical process. So we talked about that. We talked about how it's converting language into maths and then maths into language. And we talked a bit about statistics and probability and how it predicts what's going on. So that's our starting point. But what that means for AI and for language models is that what it's doing more broadly is it's creating these clear mathematical relationships between large numbers of tokens and groups of tokens. So words, ideas, sentences, statements, it's having this mathematical understanding about the relationship between things that are generally expressed in words. And it's devolving those into its statistical relationships. So that's at the heart of what the large language model and the generative AI algorithms are really all about. It's modeling of language. And we talked last week about how the training data is the AI. It's what it becomes rather than being something it refers to. But it's really those relationships, the mathematical relationships between groups of words and tokens. That's the real magic that gives us a couple of things that we can more effectively lean on or rely upon. And it means that the AI is particularly good at a couple of things just because of the way it's built and the way that underlying mathematics gives it some real strengths. Now, this is because, and there is a default assumption here, this is because that the data that was originally used to train the AI is typically high quality prose. And even if we go back a step and say, yeah, but hang on, isn't it just internet, right? Well, yes, but it's also books. It's things that have typically been through some degree of secondary or even tertiary effort, review as part of an editorial publishing process. So even all those things that are just scraped off someone's webpage, a lot of that is using syntax and prose that has been edited, it's been checked, it's been reviewed, it's been written by people who are good at it. And so to a large extent, and especially more recently, as we see AIs being more fine-tuned with what they're trained on with the later models, we get training data that is typically comprised of a slightly higher quality than you or I might blurt out when we quickly bang out an email to someone. And so that disparity is where we get our first advantage from AI, because its basic training data is working with probabilities in the tokens that are typically of a reasonably high quality. But we are dealing with probabilities. We are dealing with statistics. And so, yes, you get this other element to this, which means that you often get a reasonably high quality way of explaining or stating something, but you're going to get a somewhat more generic, average, typical way of stating that thing. We're going to delve into that in a bit more detail when we look at both the pros and cons of that phenomenon within the AI and how it works and why that actually means what we can rely upon. So let's first talk about how that directly translates into some strengths and to some specific use cases. AI, because it is built on these generally effective examples of syntax and prose, generally can give fairly good ways of expressing popular ideas and things that we know about. So this is why an AI is generally fairly stable, fairly reliable. It's not going to waffle and mumble quite the way some people, some of us do, especially if we're a little bit lost for words. It's generally going to have a reliable way because it is able to create text that is based on recognizing what those good examples of syntax and predicting what the next word is, because it's drawing from such a large amount of relatively well-written syntax and text. It's able to deliver effective prose pretty much all the time. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, that means it's great at writing stuff. That's not where I'm going with this. What we think of it as is what I call a syntax engine. It's really good at scenarios where it's looking at words and then it's understanding the relationships. And what we might want to do is find a better relationship between the words. And one of the most simplistic ways we can look at it is how we organize and analyze text. So what I'm talking about as an example here is its ability to summarize. Now, I saw when we kicked off the webinar that quite a few of you are using an AI engine to take all the notes, transcribe everything that I'm saying and others are saying here, and giving you the ability to draw summary notes out of it. They'll take a lot of the fluff and all of the stuff that gets added and be able to reliably give you a condensed version of just core pieces of knowledge out of what's discussed here. So it'll take away my repetition, it'll take away the redundancy, and it'll distill the core pieces of information. And it'll do it in either in an abstract way or it'll follow your instructions and be able to say, well, tell me, look for these pieces of information out of this 1 hour of rambling that Brenton did and find, I'm looking for these kinds of pieces of knowledge. And it'll do that for you. It'll do that with the minutes of your last work meeting. It'll do that with a 20-page document that you've thrown at it. It'll do that with a book. It'll do that with a video that you've given it or anything else. It's really good at using its understanding of language and relationships to summarize, condense, and simplify a large volume of information and turn it into something that's perhaps quicker and easier for us as a human to then make use of. Because what we are often looking to do in our work environment is make decisions. That's where we come into things. That's what we do as humans. We make decisions that move our world forward. And often the large quantities of information that we are expected to absorb and synthesize mean that we might just simplify that. We might just skim a document, and we're not going to reliably pull all the useful information out of it. But an AI, if treated as a syntax engine, is able to look at that and pretty reliably get some good, valuable summarization of it, or pieces of it that we are particularly interested in. And the reason it's doing that is because even though you're looking at a summary of a large body of text, there we have a qualitative expectation of, well, how good is that summary? But what the engine is able to do is have a quantitative approach. By converting the tokens into maths, it can use the maths and the mathematical engines that it's got to accurately and effectively pull out the quantitative measurements and then turn that back into text, which becomes a qualitative result to us. And that is kind of part of the magic of what the vast training data and LLMs and these algorithms are effectively doing. But it's not just about condensing and summarizing. It's also very effective at identifying things like outliers, finding a trend within a large body of text, and then finding an exception to that trend, finding something that stands out, finding that thing, that paragraph, that idea, that something that says something a little different. It conveys a piece of contextual understanding that's a little different, because that's what it's looking at. It's looking at the way the tokens relate to each other, and it says these relationships between these words and sentences are a little bit more separated statistically from other things. It's very good at identifying that. So it's able to find particular points of interest. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to let it decide what's important to us. So obviously, when we're asking it to use its syntax engine to pluck things out, find things, understand things, we need to be the one that sets the criteria of exactly what we're looking for. But perhaps one of its most interesting strengths is the fact that it can do this with a great deal of technical efficiency. Its context window for most AIs is significantly larger than the working memory of the average human and what we're able to analyze as a document. Like I said before, we could look at a 20-page document, we could skim it, it'll take us a bit of time, we will miss stuff. You put that into an AI, you're going to get typically a higher quality result than most people will deliver, and in a matter of seconds. So this is something now you can extrapolate out from this and say, well, I can see how the magic of the algorithms are giving it real strengths that we can kind of lean on and rely upon, and then extrapolate that functionality into other use cases and other things we can actually do with it. The reason this all changed is because you go back, let's go back 10, 15 years, and we have, Web 2.0. I'm going to throw some buzzwords in now. Web 2.0, cloud computing. Remember, that was a new thing at one stage. And then the great buzzword called big data. Now, at the beginning of this whole big data phenomenon, it was mostly a big headache because it was really a big mystery. And the reality is that most organizations back then had a lot more data in text format than they could possibly leverage, than the human beings could possibly take advantage of. But what changed with the development of large language models, we gained the ability to convert these masses of text documents and masses of text that are flowing between people in an organization and convert that into fairly accurate summaries and key points that can create or identify points of interconnect. So this is the real difference. The fact that it can convert any piece of text into something that the computer can then reliably analyze, understand, and pull out something that we've said is of interest to us. And this is a little bit, and I'm getting ahead of myself for week 4, but this is a little bit of where we're going with business and enterprise use of AI. This is something we, most of us in our workplace, can expect to see and understand a little bit more. So it's worth understanding why this is a strength and why we might be interacting with AI that's increasingly aware of what's going in our world. You've probably seen things that AI is now able to talk to your email. And how many of us get more emails than we can actually read? And how much of that has just become an accepted problem in the world we live in, where we don't read everything because we can't. But now we've got AI systems that do all the reading for us and tell us which email we really probably should pay attention to. But not only us, not only our email, but that email between that person and that person that talked about us and talked about something that we're doing. And the AI said, hey, these people are doing something and talking about something. You should connect with them. And then it does something crazy like, can I set an appointment for you? So, these are things that we are expecting for AI to do because it's inherently good at pattern matching, and it's a fantastic engine to help us organize textual data. Now, I'm going to do the extrapolation thing that I just mentioned and take us in a slightly different direction and say, well, let me talk about something that's a little bit more singularly useful to us. And this is about when we communicate. So us writing something. So I'm going to now talk about how that engine and its power can be useful to us as a feedback mechanism when we need to write something. And I'm going to be specific about what I mean by that and where we are or aren't leaning on the AI. So we can leverage this engine and this mathematical strength to help us with something, with a message we need to give, something we need to say. And I'm not saying we just sort of say to the AI, oh, just write all this for me and send it. No, I'm saying where we have the message, we are wanting to retain ownership and authorship of the message. But we want that message to be a little bit more powerful, a little bit more punchy, a little bit more effective. This is where we can often get a lot of help from an AI to improve what we do. Now, for those of you who were here last week, you might remember that I talked about the fact that as an exercise for this subject, for this course, I specifically started to use AI in a proactive and effective way as part of an exercise so I can share that with you guys and talk about how I would use it in a controlled and productive manner. And this is one of the ways in which I've done it. So if I talk to you about, for example, the pre-recorded audio, which I mentioned a little while ago, and there's 7 up there now, and there'll be 9 by the end of, well, we get the last 2 of them up there for this topic. So 9 audio lectures, right? Nearly all of that, I mean nearly everything in it, is my knowledge that I put in. And when I say nearly everything, there was a piece of lecture 2C that you haven't got yet that's around about 2 minutes, so maybe a fifth of lecture 2C, where one piece of feedback from the AI was actually such a good idea. I thought I should include, I should say that. That's a point I need to make. But everything else you get in those audio lectures are things I wanted to say. But what I did is I went through a process with the AI to refine the precise way in which I said it and the precise sequencing of the ideas to weed out little things where I've contradicted myself, where might have said something that wasn't quite as pure or wasn't as defensible. And so what I did is I created this knowledge areas for each of the audio lectures. So I wrote what is like half a page of, here's the knowledge I want to get across in this 8-minute lecture. I shared that with the AI, which already knew what my topic notes were. I'd already been through this process with the threshold concepts. And what the AI is told to do is say, come back and challenge me and give me your ideas on how I can tweak and adjust what I'm saying. And that's what it did. So I'm only leveraging the powerful engine of the way it can understand concepts. But what I'm not using is its original training data or any of its research on what I actually want to teach in this subject. That's all me. So that's the use case that I'm talking about here. What we need to be able to do, and what this use case applies to, is where it's our message and we want it to be in our words. We just want to improve its quality, improve its ability to impact the audience. But we need to be able to have a very clear test of what we want this document to do. And this is one of the first brilliant benefits of this, which before we even talk to the AI, we have to think, what's this document? What's this email? What's this thing doing for us? What do we want it to do? Because we need to articulate that to the AI, to use the AI to give us any kind of feedback or second opinion or review. So just that simple process of needing to articulate that is a leg up to even, I mean, so often we don't even do that. We write as a stream of consciousness a lot of the time, put things out in whatever order they pop into our head. Maybe we rearrange things, maybe we don't. But we don't always look at something later and say, what was my real purpose for writing this? And does this do that? So that's a piece of this puzzle. But it's our ideation. We are the author of the message. We are the mover of whatever is going to influence decisions to whoever is going to read this. We know the core message we want to give. And we are the ones that decide exactly what level of feedback we want to adopt and take on from the system like an AI. So we're not treating the AI as a knowledge expert or as a subject matter expert. We're treating the AI as a systemic expert in the way it's able to utilize the arrangement of words and sentences. In a way, we're kind of using what you might describe as a skill that the AI has, even though that's a very anthropomorphic way of describing it. But we're leveraging what is an inherent capability rather than the knowledge base that may or may not be accurate. Now, there are some trade-offs with this. There are some things that come back at us the other way. We are, as I've just mentioned, leveraging its power over syntax. We're not necessarily wanting to use its facts. We're only really leveraging its ability to understand these vast and powerful relationships between ideas and tokens. But we're not relying on its trained data to know stuff, which is where we're going to go a little bit later when we start to talk about limitations and weaknesses. We need to provide the specificity. We need to be specific about the message we want to give and about the tests that we want the AI to apply to whatever it is we're writing. Because the more we can be clear and detailed and thorough about the goals we have, the easier it is for the AI to very precisely evaluate what we've written against those goals and criteria. If we just put an email in there and say, tell me, is this any good? We're going to get a pretty broad and abstract answer. Or we might get a really lengthy lecture from the AI about how to write things differently, but without any clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve. But there's another trade-off. And some of you know about this already and have encountered this. The more we allow the AI to actually write whole sentences or whole paragraphs for us, so the more we defer the authorship to the AI, the more we're actually devolving some of what we write down into that very genericness that is, in another way, the strength of the AI. So the fact that it has this vast knowledge of generically good prose can be a problem if we just let the AI rewrite stuff with its generic prose. Perhaps even so obviously generic that it starts to look a bit like just that. So this is where we have to hold the line about exactly where is our authorship. Because the more we defer that, the more it becomes the author and not us. Our tone, our style, our character, the way we express ourselves and who we are will diminish. And you will hear me in all those audio lectures. You'll hear my phraseology. You'll hear my style of delivering stuff all the way through that, because that's what I make sure is still there. So think of it as a syntax engine. It's got this vast repertoire of of algorithms and mathematics and probabilities that help it figure out what are good word choices and what are problems or potential problems in our syntax that it can then refer to us and let us decide, is that really a problem? Right. So when I go through this process, so I said I put the knowledge areas in. This is broadly the knowledge I want to write, and I get a bit of feedback. And then I write what is typically an entire page of dot points, which is like a script writer's set of points. It's all really harshly abbreviated and simplified. But those are my talking points, and I use them like as a script prompt or like a speech to then trigger my knowledge. And that's what I want to talk about next. And then I talk about that. So then I upload that. That's what I did. I put that into the AI and say, well, do these speech notes match the conversation we just had about my objectives in knowledge areas? And it'll give me some feedback on that. And it'll quite often give me a thing that I've said, well, you changed this word here because that was better, but then you repeated the other word here. And so it's giving me this feedback to say, okay, I can tidy that up and I can tidy that up. And a few things I do and a few things I don't. We can use it to structure things. We can use it to rearrange things. We can write a larger piece of text, but we can just put it in whatever order we think of it. And we can specifically say to the AI, I just want you to identify the key points I've made and advise me if you think they should be presented in a different order that will improve readability and comprehension. And the AI will give you exactly that, and usually with powerful, useful advantages. You can use it to analyze large amounts of text, find anomalies, find key points, find anything that's of particular interest, as long as you can specify what's actually interesting to you. We can use the AI to improve our own writing on a case-by-case basis. And yeah, to some extent, if you do it that way, a little bit of that ability to reflectively analyze your own writing kind of rubs off on you. You actually gain a human version of some of those sort of deep algorithms locked away in the AI, simply because of the fact that you're developing a habit of self-reflection on the way you write, because you carried through that process. But it's always under our control. We are the ones creating the message. We are the ones that are controlling what the tests are. And we are the ones that are deciding what feedback we take on board. And ultimately, I am the one to rewrite. When I do rewrite it, when I take some advice from the AI, I rewrite that dot point in my script. I don't just copy and paste what the AI has given me, because that's not my voice. It'll say it differently. And I might like the way it's said it. It's easy to like the way AI says pretty much everything, but it's not me. Now, we've heard about this AI voice problem. We've all encountered it, right? We know that there's this thing that people can often detect, and you've probably all detected it as well. You read something and think, like, that smells a bit like AI, right? It's got a little bit of a signature, and the human brain is actually astoundingly good at being able to detect it. It's not always right, not always accurate, but I've encountered many occasions where I read something and I said, that feels so much like AI, especially because one of the things I often do with AI is use it to analyze syntax as an engine. So yes, humans are pretty good at spotting this, and that is a thing we need to be aware of. We also know that there are AI detectors out there, and yeah, they're not as reliable as some of them claim to be, or as we want them to be, but they're a thing, and they get used, and they are a way that people can use, because there is a increasing, concern, maybe at least interest in knowing whether or not something is written with AI. Because there are sections of our community that are not happy with what AI is doing, what AI is potentially doing, the way in which some people are using AI, the way in which AI is undermining certain aspects of society. We've read about this backlash. There is a certain generational element. I'm aware that certain demographics are far more concerned about what it's going to do, and other demographics are less concerned. But this is just something that we're going to have to work through as a society. And part of that is what we're now seeing with attribution. There's a growing demand for people to be able to, or being required to show attribution of AI material. And that can be, we've seen the things, some of you probably seen the recent news articles about Anthropic and Claude and its watermarking. And some of the growing expectations, even from a legal perspective. We're starting to see the beginnings of interest from lawmakers to say, well, we want some sort of accountability. We want some sort of expectation of understanding and enforced attribution of AI content. And it's a question of what's AI content, right? And I can tell you that nothing you're getting from me in this course is AI content. It is 100% my content. And the most AI can claim to do is have improved the wording on a handful of pieces or a handful of lines. Now, let's have this next poll, which is the next one we want to cover. And I think, Terry, you had some things you wanted to talk about at this point.
Absolutely. No, look, we are, I think, halfway there, Brenton. I do believe. So,
Round about
we do
that, yeah.
around about that, yeah. So, as you can see, Lil has put up the second poll. Lil, thank you so much for doing that. We do have a couple of Q&As here, Brenton, as well. So I'll go through my part, and then if we've got time, we'll go through Q&A. If not, we'll leave it till the end.
I
So,
just want to
obviously,
point out,
yeah.
for everyone, I just had to drag the bottom of that poll down just to make the
Mm,
last couple of questions appear. So
mhm.
you should be seeing quite a few. The last one is other. So if you can't see that, drag the bottom of the box down because that's what I just had to do.
That's all good, Brenton. All right, so it's time for our sort of mid-lecture advisement. So, as you may know, IT Masters has been keen into getting teaching AI in our postgraduate streams for a while now, and finally, we have some subjects ready to go. So, the two are we have an ITE 537, an introduction to AI for business, and ITE 538, AI and cybersecurity, which I will provide links into the chat. So, obviously, there are full details of both of these subjects on the CSU website and soon on ours as well. So, you'll notice that they're basically very much focused on outcomes. So, they will, and with this course, be some introductory material on how AI works and so on. But the subjects are primarily focused on the deployment, but it's also the use and cost effectiveness of AI within organizations. So obviously this is including how to manage AI systems as well as tools, but also rather than how to build an AI model and provide LLMs yourself. So we think this is the most important aspect of AI to be working with today and understanding how to actually use as well as manage these technologies in the workplace because you're going to touch all of our working lives at some point. So you can study both of these subjects without formal entry requirements as a single subject. So that means you simply go online to the CSU application site, sign up as a single subject student, and obviously the cost is very similar to a normal postgraduate subject, but maybe around $100 more, and the enrollment process isn't much harder than signing up for a free course moving forward. So, if you later want to include these subjects as part of your graduate certificate on a master's degree, they can be taken as credit with no issues. So, if you are already with us or are about to apply for a graduate certificate or master's program, then you can take these subjects now. So, the ITE, just wanted to let everyone know the ITE 537 subject, which is the Introduction to AI and Business, can be taken as part of the cybersecurity courses and the graduate certificate in computing of career transition. For AI and cybersecurity, which is ITE 538, this can be taken as part of the graduate diploma as well as the Masters of Cybersecurity. So if you're in a MBA program, I know some people may be doing it, do talk to us about it. So you may be able to get permission to include one of these subjects, even if it isn't formally included in the syllabus yet. So there's a little bit about the new subjects. They will be coming during 2027. Some official graduate certificates will also be coming along at some point in the not so distant future. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll definitely get back to you. And you can also talk to myself or any other course advisors at any time by phone or email. So what I'm going to do now is put all these links into the chat now for you to have. Okay, put that there. And obviously, I think Lil, if you can share that poll, Brenton, back over to you. Would you be happy to keep going with the slide or Q&A? We do have
Questions.
about 7 questions. Yep.
Yeah, let's tackle some questions and just
Yeah.
remind folks that we that's a thing we do is we answer questions as we go. We will do
Yeah.
that again at the end when we have our final poll. So if
Mhm.
you are sitting on a question and you don't get it answered now, put it up there and we'll try and tackle it at the end. But yeah, let's go through some of the questions we've got.
Fantastic. I'll go through. There's another guy called Terry here. So, Terry Sweetser, thank you so much for your question. What is AI slop?
I'm going to give you a personal answer to what that is and what I think that refers to. And it's sort of generic term and it's a derogatory term. And so when it becomes a derogatory term, we humans have a tendency to have a somewhat personal attribution to that term. Mine is that AI slop is typically very generic, abstract motherhood statements, pointless things that are kind of overly obvious, simple truths, stuff that when you read it, it sounds like lots of interesting words, but when you look for substance, it's either something of little consequence or something that's pretty obvious. It's not very insightful. It's often quite similar to lots of other stuff. And so a lot of things with AI slop is that well, it just goes and finds another 20 examples out there and writes you something similar. But probably 18 of those 20 examples are just doing exactly the same thing. And so it's a redundant cyclic loop. But I want to use that question as a great example to say, well, you could ask AI that question, right? You could say, what's AI slop? Now, I would never simply type what is AI slop into an AI question. You can ask me that because I'm going to interpret a much broader arrangement from what that question means. If you're going to ask an AI that, or if I was going to ask an AI, I would say, according to current and recent media and journalistic blogs and discussions, what is the community appearing to mean when they describe AI slop? Why is it a derogatory term? And what is the slop in its cleanest definition? That would be my question. That would be my prompt. And that's what I would, something like that is what I would then put out there as a qualified question to try to get something useful back from AI. And so I would encourage people to maybe give that a shot and see if you get a different answer when on some other thread you just say, what's AI slop? See what you get as a difference.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Brenton. We'll go through next one. So I've got here Nicole. Let's have a look. Nicole Thorne, thank you so much for your question. So does that mean the AI will find a word or phrase multiple times and understand it that it is important and should be included in a response?
It does do that. And that's a thing we're going to talk about in a little bit more shortly. It comes under the heading of kind of like a statistical convergence. So it's a great question because it's actually where we're heading in the next few slides. So I'm not going to overly answer it now, but to say that
Mhm.
yes, that is kind of what happens. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into exactly what that looks like in a short
Mhm.
while.
Yeah, fantastic. Craig Hoy, if a person asks a question to AI that doesn't have that many references, how can we rely on the pros that it uses to provide the output reply?
So part of my answer is going to go back to the example I just gave you when I said, let's look at the question, what is AI slop? When you put a whole bunch of qualifiers around it, what you're doing is narrowing the range in which the probabilities that AI is working with need to function. It needs to get a lot more specific and it needs to dig a lot deeper into its mathematics to try to come up with an answer. And you're going to move away from some of the more mistake-ridden abstract when you do that. But again, getting ahead of myself with a concept we're going to talk about shortly. I think that a lack of references or presence of references isn't a silver bullet because you've probably seen times when it's given you a reference for something and it's just totally made up the link URL that it's actually referring to. That can happen too. So then how do we even attribute references as being a good way to support it? Now, if I'm trying to learn something from AI, one of the things I will do is I will say, give me an answer to this summarize the three most important facts you want me to learn from it, and then justify to me why I should believe you on those three key points. And if it's really important to me, I might then put that same thing into another AI engine and say, hey, ChatGPT gave me this. I want you to critique it and tell me where you think it was right and where you think it was wrong. And you can do that a couple of times and filter out. That's if you are only able to use AI as your source of training and you want to be that thorough about it. That is a technique you can use to reduce the error count of what you're going to get. But nothing is going to replace the benefit of reading something written by an actual expert. And so that can be a question. You might ask the AI not to say, tell me about this. You know, tell me about it, but then find me one, two, or three validated websites that are clearly an expert in this field answering these kinds of questions. And then I'm going to go and read that webpage. That is the far more reliable approach to solving that problem with AI. Depends what your threshold of accuracy really is and how much time you're willing to invest in it.
Yeah,
What else we got?
great. All right, we've got Debbie Hunter. So similar to AI slop, do you consider vibe coding generally decorative or just in elitist gatekeeping?
So thank you, Debbie, for giving me two entirely polarized extreme statements to choose from. And I think my answer is going to lean into that problem because I don't think it's either. And I think, well, I understand your point, and I kind of agree that there is a valid sentiment there to react to one direction or another, because a lot of the dialogue about these really pulls us in one direction or another. I mean, you're either for it or you're against it. And I don't think that's the right approach. Now, let me give you a more personal answer to this. I am not a coder. I studied BASIC when I was back in high school, and I wrote a sorting program in high school. I've mucked about with HTML years ago. But what I did last year is I used, and you could call it vibe coding, but I used an AI to help me write a little tiny mod for a game that I play, which is moddable. It ended up about 200 lines of code. I have absolutely no hope of writing that code myself. I learned a bit about it as I went, but I got a functional mod that I could put into my game that did a funky little thing for me that I actually felt quite good about. Now, does that make me a proponent of vibe coding? Well, nobody else out there had a mod for that game that did what I wanted. What's my option? I pay someone to build it, right? Or I could just have a crack at this maybe 2 or 3 hours in an afternoon with an AI. And that's kind of what it took, a few hours. And it was kind of a fun few hours. So when you look at that as an outcome, okay, now extrapolate that out. Take the highly dangerous, ignorant, Brenton doesn't know what he's doing, and apply it to someone who's kind of got, 50, 70, 80% knowledge, but they're missing something. And then get them to say, okay, now what you start to do is you start to talk about what Agile is doing. Agile, the use case. Remember how Agile has this thing where user stories are written from the perspective of the user, real business requirement, mindset, and language. And then someone has to convert that into a technical requirement that can actually be coded. Well, guess what? We have a syntax engine that's actually going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for that for us now. Does that mean we now are against the user story person, or are we against the coding person? No. What we have is something that, if we use it well, can actually make both of those people's jobs a little easier. And so that's where I think we should be approaching it. That's a longer answer than I
That's
expected.
a very long answer. No, but it's a great answer. I've got someone from anonymous, but there's two questions. Lot of questions for this one. So, if we are using AI as you instruct us to, how can that be watermarked?
So the way I used AI, it can't be. It's not, because
Mhm.
I didn't copy and paste any line of text out of my AI into what I'm using. Not a single sentence, right? So that's something that is an ethos of mine. If I'm just writing something terribly lazy and it's not something that people are paying for, it's just me making a comment to a friend or something, even that I probably wouldn't. But, there are times when you might just copy and paste, and that can be watermarked. But the watermarking is a way that the AI can understand its own statistical relationships with certain words and letters and things and say, yeah, that follows a pattern that I can predict was part of my AI. Well, that's what the watermarking is. And so it's really easy to just give that to another AI and say, reword that stuff, right?
Hmm.
And you just avoid the AI watermarking thing altogether. It's terribly easy to bypass. That's one of the reasons why Anthropic isn't so scared of it and has put it out there. But yes, people still don't like it.
No, no, absolutely great answer for that one. Obviously, same person. Sorry, I'm just throwing questions about a few terms I heard, curious to understand about them. So, how do we optimize token usage? What is an orchestrator? What is the best free tool to set up orchestrator? And what is Loop Engineer? Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm gonna cheat here because
Mhm.
these are highly specific technical questions, and I
Yes.
actually think we probably have some great input and ideas from some of our people online right now. So I want to ask and encourage anyone who has to any one of those questions, because that's outside of my use case. I don't use it in that way, so I'm not going to be able to give you good answers. I will say though about token management is that it's all about efficiency, and it's simply the clearer we are in our own thoughts and the more concise and yet complete that we can convey our desires into an AI system. And so the more thinking we do and narrow down what we give the AI, not only will we be managing our token usage better, we will consistently get a higher quality result out of the AI because we're not going to be causing the contextual momentum problems and contextual pollution that we talked about last week. We're not going to be forcing the AI to do calculations that might confuse it. So it's a lot to do with we need to think in ways that the AI can take what we give it more effectively, and that's going to end up managing token usage better. So, but for the other questions, I'm going to pass the buck a little bit to people that I think probably will know a fair bit more about it.
Yeah, that's all good. So just got a couple more here, then we'll get back to the slides. Kevin Croft, when you say it can convert a large body of text input into quantitative data and then give it quantitative answers, what does that mean that it can tell me that 25% of the text was about an idea one, 18% about idea two, or 10% about idea three, etc.? Is that what you mean, or am I misunderstanding what you said?
That's that is a piece of how it works, but that's not what it gives you. What you would give it if you give it a 20-page document and tell me what are the key points, and then say, tell me what this document seems to claim are its biggest and most important claims. What does it spend the most time trying to explain? What is it trying to defend more? What is it? What's the document appearing to convey in terms of its importance of certain ideas? The AI will be able to do that, and it'll use a bit of exactly what your example and in your question said, but it'll give it back to us in much more simple human language terms. It will say, well, it's the document made this point, made it multiple times, gave significant evidence. It won't necessarily quote you a percentage of word count. It goes beyond that and tries to present, okay, it's this document is doing this and it's doing this and it's doing a little bit of this. And that's a qualitative answer in terms of I'm being able to evaluate the relative worth of certain ideas within a document because that's what I've asked it for. And so, but the maths that you're hinting at is sort of the maths that kind of happens under the hood because it does count the tokens. And it does say, well, these tokens kept appearing multiple times, and it's going to be able to convert that into an understanding that says that, yeah, this document thinks this is a really important point, but it'll go beyond that and how it explains it. So you're kind of right, but there's more to it than that.
Great. Two more. Sam Steinberg, looking for reliable professional references. One will not use Wikipedia, but professional references, for example, documents in IEEE. However, the IEEE documents library is private. How can AI, sorry, access those documents formally?
So if you're talking about something that's behind a restricted paywall, then yeah, unless you know that your AI system has the rights to that, and usually they don't, then you need to leverage your own relationship and grab a document and upload that, right? So that's where, and you need to make sure as well that you have the legal right to do that, because sometimes if you subscribe to a library of things, you might, as part of that subscription that you pay for commercially, they might not grant you the right to share that with anybody else, including sharing that with an AI. So you need to be careful of that.
Mm.
But if the AI doesn't have, and we will see this, we will start to see real commercial relationships between AIs and things behind firewall. As we start to see AIs go beyond the free scraping of everything, because they want to offer the benefit to their customers of curated, protected, professional information. But that'll have to be done on a commercial basis in some way. So until that exists with the AI, we are the ones that have to bypass that and create our own conduit. It's not something we can expect the AI to do reliably at this point.
Great. And final question, Chris. One question from last week. We spoke about the data hierarchy and what order AI applies priority to prompts, instructions, websites, etc. Where does the data that it has learnt come into as a priority? Is that in the first step based on the last prompt?
So if we're talking about the data that it's learned, I'm going to assume for this question that we're talking about training data, the data that it was built upon. And that is somewhere between first, as in only, or last. So, for example, if it's last, if you've told it and you've added a whole bunch of supplementary data sources that you've said, searched websites, search these kinds of websites, look at this document, prioritize this, listen to my prompt, then all of that is going to have a higher priority than its training data in terms of the facts that it's going to draw upon. If you don't give it any of that, then what it's going to default to in the absence of those instructions is just straight down to its training data. And it's going to just make probabilistic guesses of what you really want to know beyond that. So that's a big part of what we talked about last week when we talked about supplementary data. That's why we have this responsibility to control that additional data, because pretty much everything has a higher priority than the training data once you've added it. And that's the beauty of it, and that's the obligation.
Great. And I think that is done for Q&A. So,
All right, let's get back
poll.
into our slides. We've got
Yeah.
20 minutes worth of stuff to cover. We've seen the poll there.
Yep.
What are the winners? So people that are annoyed with it doesn't follow instructions. We talked a bit about
Mm.
some of the reasons that happens last week. That was great. It makes dumb mistakes. So we talked a bit about that last week as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And long rambling answers, you can't help me with that. Sorry, that is just the way they are built. Although we're starting to see some models get a little bit better with being more brief. Pet peeve is something else. I'm sure somebody has talked about the thing being sycophantic and stroking our ego. I'm sure someone's talked about that somewhere in their other categories. But the lowest was it doesn't seem to save time. So I'm guessing it does seem to save time for some people. My pet, I am annoyed by rambling answers to simple questions. I am annoyed by that. I'm not annoyed at all by it not following my instructions, because I've learned how to give it instructions. And I don't complain about it taking more time, because I don't use it to save me time. I use it almost exclusively to improve my quality. And that takes time. And I only do that when I need the quality.
Right.
All
Fantastic.
right.
All right. Brenton, it is all yours.
Thank you. Let's carry on. I want to talk about the negatives now, the limitations, and I want to talk a bit about the psychology and the science behind how this works. Let's talk about originality, because this is something that we all kind of know a bit about. We've all known and been told that, AI isn't really original, but let's delve into that, because there's actually two areas that work differently that contribute to why this is a problem we need to be aware of. All right. One of the reasons why AI can have a problem with originality is because the style of communication that AI uses is a style of communication that sounds articulate. It sounds confident, and it can make something sound correct. It can make something sound certain. It can make something sound novel and interesting and fascinating simply because of the way it's been phrased. And we humans fall into that trap because we have been doing that for a long time. Something that's new to us, that sounds a little bit, because we haven't heard it expressed quite that cleanly before, right? That doesn't mean it's truly an original idea or even a clever one. But we can subconsciously feel something is a little more powerful. Maybe you just think of it as more compelling simply because of the way it's expressed, right? So, whoops, my mouse is jumping. So something that we talk about originality, we talk about varied, but something being different, novel, new, original, that's a subjective assessment for the human being. And the way something's expressed can trick us into thinking that that's what it is when actually it really isn't. We're only looking at that topic or that idea being expressed once by an AI in a way that that sounds pretty cool. That I can really understand what that AI just said to me, and I can feel impressed by that because what I'm kind of leaning on is that slight dopamine hit that we get with the sudden awareness of our own quick comprehension. We are quickly comprehending something because the AI is good at explaining it. And so we get that positive boost in endorphins and think, yeah, oh, okay, I get that. And that feeling can translate into belief, into acceptance, and an assumption of originality. Now, I'm going to break originality as a concept into three different layers now. And I'm going to show you a little bit about where AI is good and where it's actually really not. So the three layers of originality I want to talk about. The first layer is conceptual originality. This is something, well, let me put them all up, right? Conceptual combination that's original or linguistically original. So what I mean by conceptual, that's an underlying idea that truly is original, a truly novel thing that hasn't really been discovered or talked about before. A combination that's original is ideas that might be combined in a way that they haven't been combined or shown to relate to each other before. And then that might be a new or original idea, or something that's actually just an old idea, but it's been expressed in a way that kind of sounds a bit novel. Now, AI is really good at the third one. It's really good at it. And because of that, it's good at making us think that it's actually good at the other two when it's kind of not. And there are some fundamental design reasons that make it difficult for an AI to actually be truly good at conceptual novelty or combination novelty on its own. And that's a qualifier I want you to remember because we're going to come back to it. So, user input is where the originality and where most of the potential originality that an AI can actually come up with. And I'm usually now saying, okay, linguistic, it's already good at that. You know, you can ask it to explain something three different ways and make it different each time, and it'll do a great job at that. We talked about why, right? The modeling. But then you say, now I want you to combine things in a novel way. And that's us saying, well, I want you to take this and this and this and then combine them and then show the interrelationships. That's us. That's our input that is choosing, and that's our individuality. That's us saying, make these three and then explain those relationships to me. Then the AI has some chance of coming up with originality in the combination of those things. All right. But it's us that is the trigger for that. The details that we provide. Now, there's a mathematical reason for that, which we're heading towards. This is because the strengths we talked about a moment ago, where AI models and algorithms, and going back to last week, we talked about how it's about probabilities, it's about statistics, it's about the AI deciding what is probably the next word in the sentence, and it does that for every word, right? So when we give it an injection of specifics, an injection of qualifiers, an injection of novel requests upon the AI, what we do is we push it away from the simpler mathematics. We make it dig deeper into its algorithms. We make it discard some of the quickest, most obvious, most simplistic statistical probabilities that it was probably going to give us if we hadn't added all this color and flavor. But when we do, it considers a much longer list of variables, and it starts to give us something more specific, more interesting, often a lot more valuable. And so there is a clear correlation. The level of uniqueness, the level of individuality, the level of originality that we put into our question is directly correlated to the extent to which the AI can potentially uncover a novel or an answer with some sort of novelty or originality within it. And I mean not just original as in, well, that's the first time we've heard of it, but in something that actually might be a little bit original in someone else's ears as well. So we are the truest, most reliable, most consistent source of originality that we get back from the AI. Right, so that's a thing that we need to firstly understand our obligation and then not be shy about it and understand that the biggest antidote, I won't call it a remedy because it doesn't solve the problem, but the biggest antidote to the inherent struggle with originality that AI has is us and the creativity that we put into what we ask it for and how we ask it and how deep we take that. So this is where you get the idea that an AI can be fairly convincing and what I call the smooth talking AI, but we are the ones that say, okay, we're going to provide a check and balance against that. We're going to provide depth. We're going to provide a novel kind of question. We're seeking a novel kind of answer, and we might not get it in the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth quote. One of the things that I do is I'm a role player, right? I like as a teenager, I started with Dungeons and Dragons. I enjoy role playing. I have friends that role play, so I do world building, and I often get AI to help me with the creative writing for world building. And so when you do that at the beginning of the conversation, you'll get really boring vanilla kind of stuff. But when you get a thread that's, 20,000 words long, you can start to get some really interesting, innovative, novel ideas because it's constantly bouncing off what I'm giving it. And that is actually building the rabbit hole that Alice went down into Wonderland. We can construct that by pulling the AI away from its really obvious statistical convergence and pulling it more and more towards a narrower confines in its mathematics, so that what it starts to actually reveal is something that's perhaps a little more interesting. So an AI really good at sounding clear and confident. It's really good at saying, I'm going to express this to you in ways that I'm pretty sure you're going to understand, Brenton, because as we talked about in the beginning, it's got this great understanding of language. And it's really good at knowing what a really good way of saying something probably is. Not because it understands the way humans think and learn, but simply because its probabilities of what is probably the right word is actually probably a good word, simply because of the vast amounts of probably good examples it's been trained on. But what that means is that we have the risk of thinking, okay, well, that sounded pretty good. I mean, like, we've been there. We've all spoken to that clever idiot who very confidently said, oh, this is how it works. Right. And sometimes we didn't know better. And sometimes we did, and we're like, that's totally not how that works. But boy, geez, that sounded clear, didn't it? Sounded good, right? Now we can maybe spot that problem with human to human interaction. But the problem we have with AI is we have to assume that every single interaction is with that clever idiot. That's who we're talking to every single time. And yeah, that makes it hard work for us. You know, that we are locked into the fact that we are inherently, as human beings, inclined to assume a higher level of competence and mastery and reliability on a person or entity that says something really clearly in a way that we understand it. And that's that emotional hit that we get that I mentioned before. It feels emotionally good to totally understand. Like, think of the opposite. We listen to a human being and they kind of, they waffle, they ramble, they can't find the words, and we don't quite understand them, and it's a little frustrating for us. And we know what that translates to into our assumptions about their intelligence. And even when we finally get to understand their point, we're generally not as convinced by it. And it's nothing to do with the true accuracy, or not necessarily the true accuracy of what they've said, but how articulately they've said it. That's a deeply ingrained human habit. And the problem we have now is that we now have to proactively work against thousands of years of cultural habit to talk to an AI that sounds so much like a clever person, but yet engage a bunch of filters that lets us protect ourselves from this inherently human perceptional habit. That's what we have to try and do all the way through. So confidence it's a lie, it's an assumption, and it's something that we have to train ourselves to constantly think past. We have to be the ones to bring the test. We have to be the ones to set the criteria of success for the AI. Any task we give it, we are the only valid arbiter of what a good result looks like. And we are the only ones with the true responsibility of getting the answer we want, because that thing is just a machine. And it's not going to make an effort to get it right. It can't. It's a machine. And so it's entirely within us to master the art of seeing through the confident syntax that it gives us, seeing through the fact that if we just let it, it's going to just resort to simplistic, probabilistic, bland, generic answers. And that is why you will see AI slop, because whoever worked with the AI to write that did not inject enough originality, enough individuality, did not guide the AI, did not go through enough review steps to weed that out and create something that was much more of their message and what they wanted to say. So it's easy to ask an AI to say, make me sound good, and it's great at that. But having it say, make me sound like me and good, that's a different ask. So confidence isn't directly reliability. It's not the same. And we know that AI can be confidently wrong. We also know that AI doesn't know that it's just made a mistake until it gets challenged. All right, so one of the favorite things that my AIs have to say to me is, thanks for catching that, Brenton. Absolutely one of the most popular things my AIs ever say to me. Because That's what you have to do. You have to say, and even if you don't know, sometimes the simplest thing is to tell it, go back and read your response and critique and evaluate whether or not you've made a mistake. Just that simple step can catch a percentage of the errors. Now, you might think, well, hang on, why can't the AI just do that? Well, yes, they are learning to do that, but none of it is going to be 100% foolproof. We need to be careful of how the start of reaction influences what we see and think. This is the point I just made. The AI doesn't usually recognize the mistake it's made until something triggers the reflection. Now, AI can, especially if you ask it to, tell you its degree of confidence in whatever it's saying, but usually only if you ask it. And I do that when I'm asking it to pick a topic in the news, find a dozen different news articles about it, give me some projections about what these articles, not what the AI thinks is going on, but to summarize what those journalists have said is going on and what level of confidence is found in what's being presented. You have to ask for that and you'll get it. It's capable of saying, yeah, this is a stretch. I'm not sure if this is, yeah, it's capable of that. It's capable of anything as long as you ask for it. Now, what this means, and I know that one of the questions I asked you is, what do you use AI for? And one of the options there was, well, you learn from AI. I learn from AI too, but we understand that everything it gives us is merely a statistical probability prediction. It's not fair to call it a guess. It's better than a guess. But there is a fundamental mathematic flaw in its ability to give us facts. And there's a fundamental psychological flaw in our ability to not just accept those facts. We are just not built to do that. And that's a skill we all have to learn. So learning from AI has to become a guided, iterative process. It has to be multi-threaded. It has to be challenged. It has to be heavily structured. And it has to be verified. Pardon me. But what the AI cannot do, what the AI can never have, is the human lived experience. And there's a piece of what the human mind can do that is capable of creating certainty in a way that an AI, as a probabilistic engine, can never do. The human mind can test assumptions. The human mind can test causality. And we can test causality against sources that we can grade. We can do an experiment and we can determine whether or not that experiment is accurate, how much weight we give it, how much we can believe it and rely on it. And we can decide how many times we need to repeat an experiment before we are fully accepting of its answer. We are able to understand and collate a series of experiences in our life that says that these facts can be relied upon. This cause and effect has been proven to me. This is true. And the human mind has ways of assessing that an AI simply can't do. And by saying it simply can't do it, it's currently just not built to do that. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it'll never do it, but I am saying that we're quite a long way from an AI that can do that to anywhere near the same extent that a human can do it. So an AI cannot very easily be an expert, even when you've given it just this much data. You've said, only look at this. What you've said is, in reality, you've said, rate this knowledge statistically more powerfully than other knowledge that you might be wanting to talk to, because that could be flawed, and I'm pretty sure this isn't flawed. So I want you to bump this up here, but it's still dealing with probabilities. There's still the chance that it'll say, yep, I got you, Brenton. I got you important. Whoops, dropped it. No, I got it back again, right? Yeah, don't worry about that little error that crept in. Just pretty. That still happens. So it's not flawless. It cannot test its own facts the way human consciousness can. We have to do that because humans have the ability for something called tested certainty, far more reliable. So when we need true expertise, we need a way of finding that expertise from someone that has tested certainty. And if we just don't have time and don't have access to that, we need to create a way to reduce the probability of hallucinations, probability of statistical anomalies, reduce the probability of conflations, reduce all of these probabilistic problems that get in our way by injecting more and more and more of us into the process. That's the closest thing we're going to get to a silver bullet. And it's not silver, it's just, shiny steel. Cannot truly rely on AI when true expertise is needed. Fortunately, we can get by with winging it for so many things in life that we can pretty often just rely on something that AI has given us, right up until it bites us. Okay, Lily, fire off the last poll. We're a couple of minutes before our 90 minutes is up, and we've only got one question from Ken, I can see. So if you're sitting on a question, now's the time because we're about to wrap up.
Yes, absolutely. And that poll is up. So while the poll is up and everyone's having a look, Ken's question is training data a continuous loop in every session, as in every input I make in a session is used to train that model. This seems counterintuitive as it already has context from the properly worded prompt.
Great question. We touched on that a little bit last week, and the simple answer is no. That is not what training is doing. It is not constantly training on a per prompt basis. Where you get an effect that starts to look a bit is because that supplementary data in one thread can act like an override on its training and can have a higher probability of impact. It can lean on the context, and it can have a more proportional effect, and it can seem like inside a thread it's learning, but you are absolutely not training the core model that is, model 5.2 of whatever GPT. That's not happening. The training data is typically, and there are little additions that can get made, but the majority of the training is a big bang process. You train a model, you give it a squillion pieces of text, it turns them into tokens, it creates a massive amount of mathematical tables, and it's trained. Then you've got guardrails and rules and parameters and weights for it to follow that then influence all of that. But that massive amount of data tables, that is generally not influenced. But what happens is that when you talk about, let's talk about the opt-in for training, like, are you allowing the AI to use your stuff for training? That's not training that model that you're talking to. That's going to be used to train the next model or the one after that. So it still might get used in a training purpose, but not for the model 5 point whatever that you're talking to right now. Now, I dragged the answer out to see if we had any more questions pop in, and we haven't.
We haven't, no.
I'm wondering, does that mean everyone's really sort of like, let's share the poll?
Yeah, go for
it. Because here we go. What did people, and this is wonderful. I'm loving this. We got a similar result last week where there was a pretty good spread across all the areas covered. And I'm really enjoying the fact that we seem to have things here that different people are finding value in. There was a winner, which is the real risks when asking the AI to be the originator of ideas. So that's great because that's probably one of the biggest poison to chalice problems we can face. And the next one down was the risks behind AI being confidently worded and how the human brain struggles with that. So that's wonderful. I'm really pleased to see lots of things covered here and helping everyone. Next week, we're going to talk about, here it is, we're going to talk about making it work, some practical mantras. And really, what we're going to get into there is I'm going to talk a bit about the magic of workflow and sequencing and how to help the AI incrementally go through a process. So I'll talk a little bit more about my process with the creation of this course and how I did that incrementally and why I did that incrementally. So I might even share a couple of actual prompts that I put, which I did last week, but I might share a little bit more about that and give you an example of that kind of thing in action. And that's what next week's going to be about. So hopefully lots of people will be back for that, finding that interesting, and continue to get more out of this course as we go through it.
Absolutely, Brenton. Look, everyone, that is 8:30 on the dot. Thank you so much for attending, Brenton. As always, thank you so
Boom,
much.
boom.
Yes, cannot wait for next week. Lily, thank you so much for the polls and helping with the questions. And we'll see you all next week, same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, everyone, for all your great questions. Look forward to more of them next week. Thank you from me as well.
Bye, everyone.